What are the major functions of leaves?
Leaves are the main photosynthetic organ. However, they are also important in gas exchange and water movement throughout the whole plant.
How do trees grow out of rocks?
If you didn't mow your lawn for a whole summer, eventually your lawn would become a grassy meadow. The change in community structure observed over time is known as ecological succession. When the succession begins in an area that is previously unoccupied or unchanged by other species. The process is known as primary succession. While the tree cannot actually grow out of bare rock, it can begin to grow from small amounts of soil and debris that collect in pockets of the rock. Over time the tree may grow well enough to send roots into the rock itself, causing the rock to split and making it appear that the tree has sprung from within the rock instead of from its surface.
What is industrial melanism?
Industrial melanism is the change in the coloration of species that occurs as a result of industrial pollution. Increased air pollution as a result of the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain during the 18th and 19th centuries led to an accumulation of soot on many structures including tree trunks. As a result, organisms whose coloration allowed them to use the trees to hide from predators lost that advantage and were eaten more often by predators. A classic example of this was the peppered moth, Biston bicellaria, whose coloration is polymorphic. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, collection records indicate that the darker or melanistic form was almost unknown. But by 1895 it constituted about 98% of the moths collected. The two forms eventually reached a state of balanced polymorphism. Because the change in morphology could be directly linked to the change in industry. This process is described as industrial melanism.
What is the evolutionary relationship between simple prokaryotic cells and the complex cells of eukaryotes?
Mitochondria and chloroplasts have prokaryote-like features. For example, although most of the DNA in eukaryotic cells resides in the nucleus, both mitochondria and chloroplasts have DNA molecules in their inner compartments. Mitochondrial and chloroplastic ribosomes are similar to the ribosomes of prokaryotes. The endosymbiont theory proposes that eukaryotic organisms evolved from prokaryotic ancestors. This idea supports the notion that organelles evolved from prokaryotic organisms that originally lived inside larger cells, eventually losing the ability to function as autonomous organisms.
What is recombinant DNA?
Recombinant DNA is hybrid DNA that has been created from more than one source. An example is the splicing of human DNA into bacterial DNA, so that a human gene product is produced by a bacterial cell.
Do camels store water in their humps?
The hump or humps do not store water, since they are fat reservoirs. The ability to go long periods without drinking water, up to 10 months if there is plenty of green vegetation and dew to feed on, results from a number of physiological adaptations. One major factor is that camels can lose up to 40% of their body weight with no ill effects. A camel can also withstand a variation of its body temperature by as much as 14 degrees Fahrenheit 8 degrees Celsius. A camel can drink 30 gallons, 113.5 liters of water in 10 minutes and up to 50 gallons, 189 liters, over several hours. A one-humped camel is called a dromedary or Arabian camel. A Bactrian camel has 2 humps and lives in the wild on the Gobi Desert. Today, the Bactrian is confined to Asia, while most of the Arabian camels are on African soil.
Why are islands a good place to study evolution?
Island populations tend to be reproductively isolated from the mainland. Therefore, they are more likely to demonstrate adaptations that are particular to that island's ecology. This provides researchers an opportunity to study not only how natural selection works on populations but also what forces may be at work on the mainland populations as well.
How far from shore do shark attacks occur?
In a study of 570 shark attacks, it was found that most shark attacks occur near shore. These data are not surprising since most people who enter the water stay close to the shore.
What is the function of centrioles in animal cells?
Centrioles both assemble and organize long, hollow cylinders of protein known as microtubules. They are also known as microtubule organizing centers, MTOCs.
What are the largest human genetic databases?
Genomics research on entire populations is an area that is rapidly expanding. In order to control access to genetic information and provide ethical guidelines for its use, several countries have developed human genetic databases. Iceland and the United Kingdom have national genetic databases, while Canada and Sweden have regional databases.
What is the Darwin Award?
The most popular award by that name is a humorous award given posthumously to those who improve the human gene pool by removing themselves from it.
Who discovered the first known hormone?
The British physiologists William Bayliss, 1860 to 1924, and Ernest Starling, 1866 to 1927, discovered secretin in 1902. They used the term hormone, from the Greek word hormon, meaning to set in motion, to describe the chemical substance they had discovered that stimulated an organ at a distance from the chemical site of origin. Their famous experiment using anesthetized dogs demonstrated that dilute hydrochloric acid mixed with partially digested food, activated a chemical substance in the duodenum. This activated substance, secretin, was released into the bloodstream and came in contact with cells of the pancreas. In the pancreas it stimulated secretion of digestive juice into the intestine through the pancreatic duct.
Can bark be used to identify trees?
Tree bark varies in texture and color between species. It is used as an aid in identifying a particular species, especially when there are no leaves on the tree. Barks may be classified as to whether they are firmly attached to the tree trunk or whether they peel away from the surface of the trunk easily. Barks that are firmly attached to the tree trunk may have vertical fissures or furrows that may be deep or shallow. In other varieties of tree, the bark may look as if it is divided into squares or rectangles or other irregular shapes resembling scales. An example of scale bark is found in various species of the pine, genus Pinus. Shag bark has long overlapping thin sheets, such as is found in eucalyptus, genus Eucalyptus. Paper birch, Badala papyrifera, is an example of a species with bark that peels away from the tree easily, also known as ring bark.
What is a MVP?
The MVP, minimum viable population size, is the smallest number of individuals needed to perpetuate a population, subpopulation, or species. PVAs, population viability analyses, are especially helpful in predicting the MVP.
What is crossing over?
When sister, homologous, chromosomes line up during the early stages of meiosis I, segments of DNA may be moved from one chromosome to another when the two strands overlap. This process is known as crossing over. since gene sequences cross from one chromosome to its sister chromosome.
How do elephants find each other across the savanna?
Although elephants are well known for the trumpeting calls that they make when angry or disturbed, they are also capable of using ultrasound, sounds above the range of human hearing, and infrasound, sounds below the range of human hearing, to communicate with one another. Researchers have concluded that elephants may be able to hear ultrasonic calls from as far away as 2.5 miles 4 kilometers. In contrast, it is estimated that an infrasonic call by a male elephant could in fact cover an area of 11.6 square miles 30 square kilometers.
How many chloroplasts are in plant cells?
Unicellular algae may only have one large chloroplast, whereas a plant leaf cell may have between 20 and 100.
What are examples of sex-linked traits?
Sex-linked traits are most commonly found on the X chromosome and include color blindness. Both red and green types, hemophilia, types A and B, ichthyosis, a skin disorder causing large dark scales, and Duchenne muscular dystrophy. There are very few Y-linked traits. Hairy ears, a relatively rare trait, is a Y-linked trait.
What is golden rice?
In 2000, scientists used 3 genes, 2 from a daffodil and 1 from a bacterium, to create a rice variety that contained beta-carotene. The importance of this is that in the human body, beta-carotene is converted to vitamin A, a crucial vitamin missing from the diet of millions of poor people around the world. Lack of vitamin A causes the death of an estimated 1 million of Asia's poorest children due to weakened immune systems. Vitamin A deficiency is also linked to blindness. The rice was called golden rice because it turned yellow like a daffodil.
What is unusual about the natural distribution of lichens?
Lichens are widespread because they are able to live and grow in some of the harshest environments on Earth. They occur from arid desert regions to the Arctic. They grow on bare soil, tree trunks, rocks, fence posts, and alpine peaks all over the world. Some lichens are so tiny that they are almost invisible to the naked eye. Others, like reindeer mosses, may cover acres of land with ankle-deep growth. One species of the genus Verrucaria grows underwater as a submerged marine lichen. Lichens are often the first inhabitants of newly exposed rocky areas. In Antarctica there are more than 350 species of lichens but only 2 species of plants.
Why would the honeybee genome be important?
The honeybee, Apis mellifera, is a major pollinator of crops and is a social insect, making it significant for basic research on insects.
What is the wobble hypothesis?
It turns out that only the first 2 nucleotides of the codon and anticodon bond together securely during translation. The flexibility of bonding at the third site, the wobble, allows cells to build only 45 tRNA molecules to cover the 64 possible mRNA codons. By converting an adenine base into a molecule called eosine, the tRNA increases the number of mRNA nucleotides it can match in the third position. This hypothesis was first proposed by James Watson, 1928. And has since been borne out by a number of experiments.
How do cells store energy?
Plants and animals use glucose as their main energy source, but the way this molecule is stored differs. Animals store their glucose subunits in the form of glycogen, a series of long, branched chains of glucose. Plants store their glucose as starch, formed by long, unbranched chains of glucose molecules. Both glycogen and starch are formed through the chemical reaction of dehydration synthesis, and both are broken down through the process of hydrolysis.
What is the purpose of stomata?
Stomata, singular stoma from the Greek term stoma, meaning mouth, are specialized pores in the leaves and sometimes in the green portions of the stems as well as flowers and fruits. Carbon dioxide, CO2, enters the plant through the stomata, while water vapor escapes through the same pores. The guard cells that border the stomata expand and contract to control the passage of water. Carbon dioxide, CO2, and oxygen, O2.
Which plant has the deepest root system?
Roots of the desert shrub mesquite, Prosope juliflora, have been found growing nearly 175 feet 53.5 meters deep near Tucson, Arizona.
Why is electrophoresis important for biological research?
Gel electrophoresis has become an important tool to identify DNA molecules. Genetic differences between different species of plants and animals have been identified using gel electrophoresis. Protein molecules that differ by a single amino acid can be identified. This process is useful for determining the genetic fingerprint of an individual.
How has the classification of organisms changed throughout history?
From Aristotle, 384 to 322 B. CE, to Carolus Linnaeus, 1707 to 1778, scientists who proposed the earliest classification systems divided living organisms into two kingdoms: plants and animals. During the 19th century, Ernst Haeckel, 1834-1919, proposed establishing a third kingdom: Protistophore. Simple organisms that did not appear to fit in either the plant or animal kingdom. In 1969, R. H. Whittaker, 1920 to 1980, proposed a system of classification based on 5 different kingdoms. The groups Whittaker suggested were the bacteria group Prokaryotae, originally called Monera, Protista; fungi, 4 multicellular forms of non-photosynthetic heterotrophs and single-celled yeasts, Plantae, and Animalia. This classification system is still widely accepted. However, a 6-kingdom system of classification was proposed in 1977 by Carl Woese, 1928. The groups proposed in the 6-kingdom approach are Archaebacteria and Eubacteria. Both for bacteria, Protista, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. In 1981, Woese proposed a classification system based on 3 domains. A level of classification higher than kingdom bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. The domain eukarya is subdivided into 4 kingdoms: Protista, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia.
What is the function of root hairs?
Root hairs increase the surface area of the root system, allowing the roots to absorb water and minerals more efficiently. In a study on one rye plant, it was estimated that the plant had approximately 14 billion root hairs, with an absorbing surface area of 480 sq yards, 401 sqm. If these root hairs were placed end to end, they would extend well over 6,214 miles, 10,000 kilometers.
What is the relationship between ancient plants and coal formation?
Coal, formed from ancient plant material, is organic. Most of the coal mined today was formed from prehistoric remains of primitive land plants, particularly those of the Carboniferous period, which occurred approximately 300 million years ago. 5 main groups of plants contributed to the formation of coal. The first 3 groups were all seedless, vascular plants, ferns, club mosses, and horsetails. The last two groups were the now extinct seed ferns and the primitive gymnosperms. Forests of these plant groups were in low-lying, swampy areas that periodically flooded. When these plants died, they decomposed. But as they were covered by water, they did not decompose completely. Over a period of time, the decomposed plant material accumulated and consolidated. Layers of sediment formed over the plant material during each flood cycle. Heat and pressure built up in these accumulated layers and converted the plant material to coal. The various types of coal, lignite, bituminous, and anthracite, were formed as a result of the different temperatures and pressures to which the layers were exposed.
What are isomers?
Isomers are compounds with the same molecular formula but differing atomic structure within their molecules. The atoms of structural isomers are connected in different ways. Geometric isomers differ in their symmetry about a double bond. Optical isomers are mirror images of each other.
How fast is DNA copied?
In prokaryotes, about 1,000 nucleotides can be copied per second. So all of the 4.7 MB of Escherichia coli can be copied in about 40 minutes. Since the eukaryotic genome is immense compared to the prokaryotic genome, one might think that the eukaryotic DNA replication would take a very long time. However, actual measurements show that the chromosomes in eukaryotes have multiple replication sites per chromosome. Eukaryotic cells can replicate about 500 bases per minute. The actual time to copy the entire genome would depend on the size of their genome.
How do chloroplasts work?
Chloroplasts are able to capture solar energy to perform photosynthesis. The reduction of carbon dioxide to simple carbohydrates. This process entails a series of reactions that result in the chemical splitting of water and the release of oxygen into the environment. During the light phase, chlorophyll molecules absorb energy from light and their electrons become energized. These excited electrons pass energy from one chlorophyll molecule to another, resulting in the production of ATP and a special nucleic acid type carrier known as NADP. This molecule carries the electrons to the next stage of photosynthesis, the dark phase. The dark reactions manufacture sugars using the energy stored during NADP and ATP. The conversion of carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere into carbon atoms in living organisms is called carbon fixation.
How are centigrade temperatures converted into Fahrenheit temperatures?
The formula for converting centigrade temperatures into Fahrenheit is degree F equals degree C x 9/5 plus 32. The formula for converting Fahrenheit temperatures into centigrade is degree C, degree F 32, x 5/9.
What are the stages of mitosis?
Mitosis involves the replication of DNA and its separation into two new daughter cells. While only 4 phases of mitosis are often listed, the entire process is actually comprised of 6 phases. Interphase involves extensive preparation for the division process. Prophase, the condensation of chromosomes, the nuclear membrane disappears. Formation of the spindle apparatus, chromosomes attach to spindle fibers. Metaphase, chromosomes, attached by spindle fibers, align along the midline of a cell. Anaphase, the centromere splits and chromatids move apart. Telophase, the nuclear membrane reforms around newly divided chromosomes. Cytokinesis, the division of cytoplasm, cell membranes. And organelles occur. In plants, a new cell wall forms.
Is it possible to observe evolutionary change in other species?
The change in allele frequencies within populations, which is driven by natural selection, is occurring around us constantly. However, whether we can actually observe those changes is a different matter. For example, elephants may be adapting to changing conditions in their environment. But since they tend to be extremely long-lived, it is unlikely that we will be able to follow enough generations to observe a trend. On the other hand, it is possible to notice such changes in populations of individuals with very short lifespans, particularly when they are experimentally manipulated. Bacteria and guppies are just 2 examples of species that have been observed evolving in response to changing environmental conditions.
How do animals know when it is time to migrate?
Although there are several cues that animals could use to stimulate migration, the most consistent year after year would be the change in duration of daylight, also known as photoperiodism. Although it has been suggested that temperature changes might also play a role, light is still the best predictor of migratory onset.
What is the largest group of mollusks?
The gastropods, class Gastropoda, which includes snails, slugs, and their relatives, is the largest and most diverse group of mollusks. It includes more than 40,000 different species and comprises the second largest group of related animals. Only the insects comprise a larger group. Most gastropods are marine animals, but there are many freshwater species. Garden snails and slugs have adapted to land.
What are the upper and lower shell of a turtle called?
The turtle, order Testudinas, uses its shell as a protective device. The upper shell is called the dorsal carapace and the lower shell is called the ventral plastron. The shell sections are referred to as the scuettes. The carapace and the plastron are joined at the sides.
What are blood groups?
There are more than 20 genetically determined blood group systems among humans known today. But the AB0 and Rh systems are the most important ones used to type blood for human blood transfusions. Different species of animals have varying numbers of blood groups.
What are the steps of microscopic autoradiography?
In microscopic autoradiography, the desired radioactively labeled compound is first added to cells or organisms, and the material is then incubated. After a period of time to allow the radioactive compound to become incorporated into newly forming intracellular molecules and structures, the incubation is stopped. And the biological specimen is rinsed to wash away the excess radioactive compound. The specimen is prepared in a conventional manner, sectioned and placed on a microscopic slide. The slide is then covered with a thin layer of photographic emulsion. Next, the prepared slide is placed in a sealed box for an appropriate period of time. Several days to several weeks, to allow the radioactivity in the cell to expose the emulsion above it. Upon removal from the sealed box, the emulsion is developed, and the specimen is examined under the microscope.
How do plants maximize exposure to light?
The leaves of many plants move. Leaves often orient themselves perpendicularly to sunlight, thereby increasing the amount of light absorbed for photosynthesis. Leaves also form unusual patterns of layering, called mosaics, that minimize the shading of leaves by each other.
Which antibiotic is considered the last resort for treating resistant strains of staphylococcal and enterococcal infections?
Staphylococcal and enterococcal infections often have to be treated with vancomycin. As this antibiotic is lethal to these resistant strains of bacteria often found in hospitals. Until recently, vancomycin was effective against these resistant pathogens. However, in the late 1980s a vancomycin-resistant strain of Enterococcus developed and began posing a threat to hospital patients and the healthcare community. Researchers continue to chemically alter the vancomycin molecule to help it remain effective as the antibiotic of last resort.
What is the scientific study of fungi called?
The scientific study of fungi is called mycology, which is derived from the Greek word mykote, meaning fungus. The first extensive taxonomical study of fungi, Systemia Mycologicum, was published by Elias Fries, 1794–1878, and Christian Hendrik Persoon, 1761–1836. In 1821–32. The book is still considered the authoritative resource on fungal taxonomy.
What is a gene library?
A gene library is a collection of cloned DNA, usually from a specific organism. Just as a conventional library stores information in books and computer files, a gene library stores genetic information either for an entire genome, a single chromosome, or specific genes in a cell. For example, one can find the gene library of a specific disease such as cystic fibrosis. The chromosome where most cystic fibrosis mutations occur, or the entire genome of those individuals affected by the disease.
How do brain cells store memories?
The part of your brain responsible for processing memory is the hippocampus. It is believed that memories are formed at the level of individual nerve cells. The synapse is the point at which adjoining nerve cells touch, and it is this juncture that is the building block of memory systems. Information moves across the synapse, the information signal is carried inside a cell by a second messenger, known as cyclic AMP, which then activates other cell machinery. The end result is the switching on of a gene that regulates memory. The product of the gene, a protein, promotes synaptic growth and can convert short-term memory to long-term memory.
What are the most common macromolecules used as energy sources by cells?
Cells use a variety of macromolecules as energy sources. Carbohydrates, lipids, and even proteins can be metabolized for energy. ATP and related compounds are also used as temporary energy storage vehicles.
What is the bottleneck effect?
The bottleneck effect is a term used to describe a population that has undergone some kind of temporary restriction that has severely reduced its genetic diversity. A bottlenecking event could be an epidemic or natural disaster like fire or flood. It is hypothesized that the lack of genetic diversity among African cheetahs is due to some bottlenecking event in the species past.
What is the function of the endomembrane system?
The endomembrane system allows macromolecules to diffuse or be transferred from one of the components of the system to another.
What is the advantage of thin layer chromatography?
Thin layer chromatography is a much quicker technique than paper chromatography. To separate a mixture using paper chromatography may take 24 hours. But less than 1 hour using thin layer chromatography.
What distinguishes the different types of microscopes?
Microscopes have played a central role in the development of cell biology, allowing scientists to observe cells and cell structures that are not visible to the human eye. The two basic types of microscopes are light microscopes and electron microscopes. The major differences between light and electron microscopes are the source of illumination and the construction of the lenses. Light microscopes utilize visible light as the source of illumination and a series of glass lenses. Electron microscopes utilize a beam of electrons emitted by a heated tungsten filament as the source of illumination. The lens system consists of a series of electromagnets. Recent advances using optical techniques have led to the development of specialized light microscopes, including fluorescence microscopy, phase contrast microscopy, and differential interference contrast microscopy. In fluorescence microscopy, a fluorescent dye is introduced to specific molecules. Both phase contrast microscopy and differential interference contrast microscopy utilize techniques that enhance and amplify slight changes in the phase of transmitted light as it passes through a structure that has a different refractive index than the surrounding medium.
What seedless, vascular plant played a role in early photography?
Prior to the invention of flash bulbs, photographers used flash powder that consisted almost entirely of dried spores from club mosses of the genus Lycopodium.
Which bear lives in a tropical rainforest?
The Malayan sun bear, Ursus malayanus, is one of the rarest animals in the tropical forests of Sumatra. The Malay Peninsula, Borneo, Burma, Thailand, and southern China. The smallest bear species, with a length of 3.3 to 4.6 feet, 1 to 1.4 m. and weighing 60 to 143 pounds, 27 to 65 kilograms, it has a strong, stocky body. Against its black, short fur it has a characteristic orange-yellow colored crescent across its chest, which according to legend represents the rising sun. With powerful paws having long, curved claws to help it climb trees in the dense forests, it is an expert tree climber. The sun bear tears at tree bark to expose insects, larvae, and the nests of bees and termites. Fruit, coconut palms, and small rodents are also part of its diet. Sleeping and sunbathing during the day, it is active at night. Unusually shy and retiring, cautious, and intelligent. The sun bear is declining in population as its native forests are being destroyed.
What group of animals was the first to make a partial transition from water to land?
Amphibians have made a partial transition to terrestrial life. The living amphibians include newts, salamanders, frogs, and toads. Although lungfish made a partial transition to living out of the water, amphibians were the first to struggle onto land and become adapted to a life of breathing air while not constantly surrounded by water.
What are cell junctions?
Cell junctions are the specialized connections between the plasma membranes of adjoining cells. The three general types of cell junctions are tight junctions, anchoring junctions, and communicating junctions. Tight junctions bind cells together, forming a barrier that is leak-proof. For example, tight junctions form the lining of the digestive tract, preventing the contents of the intestine from entering the body. Anchoring, or adhering, junctions link cells together, enabling them to function as a unit and forming tissue, such as heart muscle or the epithelium that comprises skin. Communicating, or gap, junctions allow rapid chemical and electrical communication between cells. They consist of channels that connect the cytoplasm of adjacent cells.
What characteristics distinguish a leaf from a leaflet?
The two criteria used to distinguish a leaf from a leaflet are: 1. Buds are found in the axils of leaves but not in the axils of leaflets, and 2. Leaves extend from the stem in various planes while the leaflets of a given leaf all lie in the same plane.
How are coral reefs formed and how fast are they built?
Coral reefs grow only in warm, shallow water. The calcium carbonate skeletons of dead corals serve as a framework, upon which layers of successively younger animals attach themselves. Such accumulations, combined with rising water levels, slowly lead to the formation of reefs that can be hundreds of meters deep and long. The coral animal, or polyp, has a columnar form. Its lower end is attached to the hard floor of the reef, while the upper end is free to extend into the water. A whole colony consists of thousands of individuals. There are two kinds of corals, hard and soft, depending on the type of skeleton secreted. The polyps of hard corals deposit around themselves a solid skeleton of calcium carbonate. Chalk, so most swimmers see only the skeleton of the coral. The animal is in a cup-like formation into which it withdraws during the daytime. The major reef builder in Florida and Caribbean waters, Montas triannularis. Star coral, requires about 100 years to form a reef just 3 feet 1 meter high.
How widespread is the use of GMO crops?
As of 2002, more than 120 million acres, 40 million hectares, of fertile farmland were planted with GMO crops. The acreage is confined to 4 countries: United States, containing 68% of the total acreage; Argentina, 22%, Canada, 6%, and China, 3%.
When were bacteria discovered?
Antony van Leeuwenhoek, 1632–1723, a Dutch fabric merchant and civil servant, discovered bacteria and other microorganisms in 1674 when he looked at a drop of pond water through a glass lens. Early, single-lens instruments produced magnifications of 50 to 300 times real size. Approximately one-third of the magnification produced by modern light microscopes. Primitive microscopes provided a perspective into the previously unknown world of small organisms, which von Leeuwenhoek called animalcules in a letter he wrote to the Royal Society of London. Because of these early investigations, von Leeuwenhoek is considered to be the father of microbiology.
What are the characteristics of the protists?
Protists are a diverse group of organisms. All protists are eukaryotic. Many are unicellular, but they may be multicellular, multinucleate, or exhibit a colonial organization. Although most are microscopic, some are much larger, reaching lengths of nearly 200 feet 60 meters. In early, traditional taxonomic schemes, they were united on the basis of being neither plant nor animal nor fungus. Current evidence suggests that protists exhibit characteristics of the plant, animal, and fungi kingdoms.
Why do lemmings rush to the sea?
Lemmings are a type of rodent whose plague behavior has been studied for decades. Every 4 years or so, lemming populations in Canada explode to the point where fur trappers describe the tundra as being alive with the little brown mice. In fact, the population density varies from less than 20 mice per hectare, 2.5 acres, in some years to as many as 200 in that same space the next year. What is puzzling to scientists is that while it is possible to observe this population boom firsthand, the impetus for the growth and rapid decline, the population drops again within a few months, has not yet been determined. Although it has been documented that these population explosions cause an overconsumption of the available food, there is no evidence that such overcrowding can cause the lemmings to become suicidal, or even incredibly thirsty, and rush en masse into the sea. Instead, the lemming migrations begin slowly with small groups traveling at night, and gradually build so that animals travel in larger groups in the daytime. They tend to avoid water but will swim if necessary. Lemmings can cross a 656 feet 200 meters body of water on a calm night, but most will drown on a windy night, which may be the source of the myth.
When was Dutch elm disease first identified in North America?
Dutch elm disease was first identified in 1930 in Cincinnati, Ohio. The source of the fungus was shown to be elm logs imported from Europe. By 1940 the disease had spread to 9 states. By 1950 it was found in 17 states and had spread into southern Canada. Today it is found wherever elm trees grow throughout North America.
What is a molecular clock?
The molecular clock is a hypothesis that assumes that random mutation, in terms of the substitution of one nucleotide for another, occurs at a linear rate. By comparing the number of nucleotide substitutions between two species, scientists could then estimate the amount of time that has elapsed since they shared that sequence with their most recent common ancestor.
Can an RNA sequence be made into DNA?
Yes, it can. A process known as reverse transcription can convert an RNA sequence into DNA by using an enzyme known as reverse transcriptase. First observed in retroviruses like HIV, reverse transcriptase has also been identified as playing a role in the copying of DNA segments from one site to another in the genome.
How are drugs detoxified by cells?
Drugs are detoxified by the smooth endoplasmic reticulum of liver cells. Detoxification usually involves changing the molecular structure of a toxin. A modification that increases the toxin's solubility, allowing it to be safely carried away by the blood and excreted via urine. Cells are able to increase their detoxification efforts when drug levels increase. Investigations conducted with rats that have been injected with a sedative known as phenobarbital have shown a striking increase in the amount of smooth endoplasmic reticulum of the liver cells.
What is a base pair?
The phrase base pair is a way of describing the length of DNA. Since most DNA is double-stranded, every nitrogen base containing nucleotide on one strand of the molecule is paired with a complementary base on the other strand. Thus, 10 base pairs refers to a segment of DNA that is 10 nucleotides in length and 2 strands in width.
What different types of aggressive behavior do animals display?
Animals can show aggression through sound, e.g., growls, barks, trumpeting, sight, e.g., changing coloration, inflating body structures, and even scent. They can change the way they move, where they perch, or how much tooth enamel they display. For example, yawning among male mandrills is often not an expression of boredom but rather an opportunity to display their well-honed canine teeth.
What is X-ray crystallography?
X-ray crystallography, also called X-ray diffraction, is used to determine crystal structures by interpreting the diffraction patterns formed when X-rays are scattered by the electrons of atoms in crystalline solids. X-rays are sent through a crystal to reveal the 534 pattern in which the molecules and atoms contained within the crystal are arranged.
What are some causes of root damage?
Roots may be damaged by temperature extremes, drought, nematodes, and other soil microfauna such as springtails that nibble the succulent roots. When there is known damage to the roots, cutting back the shoot system helps. To re-establish the balance between the root system and the shoot system, transplanting seedlings and other plants also damages roots, especially the root hairs.
What is the role of the male bee?
Their job is to fertilize the new queens.
What is replacing natural cork for wine stoppers?
Plastic corks are replacing natural cork for wine stoppers. During the 1980s and early 1990s, bad cork was traced to the fungal contaminant 2,4,6-trichloroanisole, TCA. TCA flattens the taste of the wine, removing the flavors the winemaker worked hard to produce. Additionally, the demand for wine in bottles has grown faster than the supply of cork from cork oaks. Although natural cork is still used for the best and most expensive wines, those that are aged for 20 or more years, plastic cork is becoming widely used at the lower end of the wine industry. Most plastic corks use a high-grade plastic that eliminates taste and odor problems of contaminated natural cork.
What toxic substances are produced by mushrooms?
The most toxic substances produced by mushrooms are amatoxins and phallotoxins, both cyclopeptides. These toxins act by interfering with RNA and DNA transcription, inhibiting the formation of new cells. The toxins collect in the liver, ultimately leading to liver failure.
What is so good about fish oil?
Fish oils, extracted from species such as mackerel, salmon, anchovy, sardines, and tuna, are excellent sources of the essential omega-3 fatty acids. However, they are not the only possible source. Nuts and seeds also provide omega-3 fatty acids. Nutritionists recommend that these fatty acids be acquired through a healthy and diverse diet rather than by taking nutrient supplements.
What is transformation?
Transformation is the process by which a cell or an organism incorporates foreign DNA. Transformation usually occurs between a plasmid and a bacterium. The transformed cell or organism then produces the protein encoded by the foreign DNA. In order to determine whether cells have been transformed, the foreign DNA usually contains a marker, such as the gene for penicillin resistance. Only cells with the resistance gene will be able to grow in a culture medium containing penicillin.
What animals have been studied for play behavior?
Coyotes, wolves, and dogs, all canids, have been studied extensively for comparisons of play behavior patterns. Neither dogs, specifically beagles, nor wolves showed agonistic behavior during play. In comparison, coyotes showed high levels of agonistic Behavior throughout a comparable developmental period. Coyotes usually establish dominance in a pack by fighting at an early age. How is BF?
How are taste and smell related?
By convention, air-breathing vertebrates, including humans, associate taste with materials that come in direct contact with the animal, usually through the mouth. By contrast, smell is associated with substances that reach the animal from a distance, usually through the nose. However, the distinction between the two becomes blurred when considering animals that live in water. Although fishes have well-developed chemoreceptors, scientists generally do not refer to the senses of taste and smell in fishes.
What are some products derived from secondary xylem, wood, and secondary phloem, bark?
More than 5,000 products are made from secondary xylem and phloem from the trees that grow in the United States. The greatest number of products use lumber, including fences, telephone poles, homes, furniture, flooring, sports equipment, oars, skis, bats, bowling pins, croquet balls, pool sticks, and musical instruments, violins. Lumber is also used to make veneers, plywood, and particle board. Other products derived from wood are pulp and paper, fuel, wood-burning stoves, charcoal, fabrics, ropes, spices such as cinnamon, dyes, drugs, quinine, taxol, and tannins.
What is an estuary?
Estuaries are places where freshwater streams and rivers meet the sea. The salinity of such areas is less than that of the open ocean but greater than that of a typical river. So organisms living in or near estuaries have special adaptations. Estuaries are rich sources of invertebrates such as clams, shrimps, and crabs, as well as fishes such as striped bass, mullet, and menhaden. Unfortunately, estuaries are also popular locations for human habitation and businesses. Contamination from shipping, household pollutants, and power plants, which are carried to the sea by rivers and streams, threaten the ecological health of many estuaries.
What is meant by the term polar molecule?
Polar molecules have opposite charges at either end. Polar refers to the positive and negative sides of the molecule. If a molecule is polar, it will be attracted to other polar molecules. This can affect a wide range of chemical interactions, including whether a substance will dissolve in water. The shape of a protein, and the complex helical structure of DNA. Water is an example of a polar molecule.
What are the three types of fibers found in the cytoskeleton of eukaryotic cells?
The cytoskeleton is a network of fibers that maintains the shape of cells. The three types of fibers are actin filaments, microtubules, and intermediate filaments. Actin filaments are long fibers composed of two protein chains. They are responsible for cellular movements, such as contraction, crawling, pinching during division, and formation of cellular extensions. Microtubules are hollow tubes composed of a ring of 13 protein filaments. They are responsible for moving materials within the cell. Intermediate filaments are tough, fibrous protein molecules structured in an overlapping arrangement. They are intermediate in size when compared to actin filaments and microtubules, and provide structural stability to cells.
What is social Darwinism?
Social Darwinism is one of a number of perversions of Darwin-Wallace theory. These movements attempt to use evolutionary mechanisms as excuses for social change. Followers of social Darwinism believe that the survival of the fittest applies to socio-economic environments as well as evolutionary ones. By this reasoning, the weak and the poor are unfit and should be allowed to die without societal intervention. This idea has nothing to do with Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace but was promoted by Herbert Spencer, 1820 to 1903, and is related to the works of Thomas Malthus, whose work did indeed inspire Darwin. Although social Darwinism has faded as a movement, it did help to spur the eugenics movement of Nazi Germany as well as a number of laws and policies in the United States in the 20th century.
What freshwater mammal is venomous?
The male duck-billed platypus, Ornithorhynchus anatinus, has venomous spurs located on its hind legs. When threatened, the animal will drive the spurs into the skin of a potential enemy, inflicting a painful sting. The venom this action releases is relatively mild and generally not harmful to humans.
What are the four major types of tissue?
A tissue, from the Latin texere, meaning to weave, is a group of similar cells that perform a specific function. The four major types of tissue are epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve.
What is the most popular state insect?
The honeybee is by far the most popular state insect, having been selected by 16 states, Arkansas, California, nicknamed the Beehive State, Georgia, Kansas, Louisiana, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, New Jersey, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Vermont, and Wisconsin.
Why is light important for living organisms?
Virtually all life depends on the availability of light, which powers photosynthesis, the process of synthesizing energy. Light travels in waves, and its energy is contained in packets called photons. The energy of a photon is inversely proportional to the wavelength of the light. The longer the wavelength, the less energy per photon. Sunlight consists of a spectrum of colors present in light.